General Dempsey and I are pleased to announce that we are eliminating the direct ground combat exclusion rule for women. And we are moving forward with a plan to eliminate all unnecessary gender-based barriers to service.
Women in direct infantry combat roles are less likely to survive and less likely to help others survive.
The point is that you shouldn't make gross generalizations and classify all women and say that no women can do something and all men can.
It is very true that there is a difference in strength between men and women. For example, my first sergeant was mortally wounded when we were in Iraq, and he was in the turret of an amphibious assault vehicle, and two men had to jump up and physically pull him out of the turret to get him to a medevac. He was a 6'5", roughly 250-pound man. I haven't seen a woman yet that would be able to pull that man out of the amphibious assault vehicle and try to get him to a medevac.
At the risk of producing a dull unanimity, let me just say that there are equities and, I think, good faith arguments on both sides. Obviously, on the pro side, women in the military welcome this. They want the opportunity. Second, whenever you open up anything that a part of society has been shut out of, you're increasing the pool of talent from which you can draw. Now, the argument on the other side is that there's a reason why we have professional men's basketball and a separate league where you have women's basketball. There's a reason why in the Olympics you have the men's decathlon and the men's boxing and the men's weightlifting, because if the women were to compete with the men, they would not have a chance. Now, the differences are clearly not a matter of discrimination or prejudice. They are simple a physical fact. It's true that in a more high-tech army that makes less of a difference. This isn't exactly Agincourt. We're not wearing chainmail and wielding battle axes, but nonetheless, there's still an element of strength and endurance which is required. So I think the way to deal with this is ultimately to say, you will allow those few women who can meet the standard that the men do, but you shouldn't be lowering standards. And that will produce a smaller number of women than men, and that is a result of the fact that on height, on weight, on strength and endurance, the women's bell curve is to the left of the men's. So as long as you don't lower the requirements so that the numbers will look more equal, I think it's a good idea.
I think you would agree with me that every day that goes by in Syria, it gets worse.
Every day that goes by,
it gets worse. So there is it seems to me, a very strong impetus that we realize that the present policy is not succeeding, and to look at other options to prevent what is going on for now 22 months and 60,000 dead. I thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
But I think you would agree with me that whatever judgments you make, they have to pass a test of whether or not, if you do them, they're actually going to make things better.
I want to play a soundbite from yesterday that we didn't focus on, Hillary Clinton about weapons. Take a listen.
So this Pandora's box, if you will, of weapons coming out of these countries in the Middle East and North Africa is the source of one of our biggest threats. There's no doubt that the Algerian terrorists had weapons from Libya. There's no doubt that the Malian remnants of AQIM have weapons from Libya.
And that's the first time publicly we've heard the Secretary of State say that these weapons from Libya are in the hands of AQIM, which is al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, in Algeria, in Mali, from Libya. A lot of these weapons are from us, the U.S., that we gave to Libya. The question that Senator Rand Paul asked was, were we moving weapons to Syria through Turkey and other places? But the Secretary of State was talking about Libya, weapons from Libya now in the hands of al-Qaeda there. I mean, that's a huge deal, the fact that al-Qaeda is exploding in that area, Charles.
And the irony is that it isn't only the weapons that came out of Libya. It's the fighters, the lead element, the lead jihadist element in Mali, the one that is most extreme, you know, the cutting off of hands under the Sharia law that they've imposed in Mali, were a contingent of the foreigners that Gaddafi had hired to fight his wars. And when Gaddafi went down, they fled. And they chose Mali as a place to go, and obviously a good choice from their perspective. So it isn't only the weapons, it's the fighters who've now dispersed, because he had a lot of mercenaries. So that is a result, unintended, of course, of the war in Libya. And I don't think that this administration thought that this would happen, but now that it has happened, and not only has happened, but the French have actually stepped in to do something about it, we are just standing back. And clearly the administration doesn't even have a policy. It doesn't even know which way to go. It took a couple of weeks before it agreed to simply provide logistics for the French, like airlift, which they need. But it has no idea what to do in these places. And the fact that it denied for so long, to go back to the other part of the hearings, that there was any terror involvement or a way to cover it up and pretend it didn't happen in North Africa, is an indication of how much they've had their head in the sand and how much they've lived off the killing of bin Laden as a way to tell themselves that the war on terror was over.
This has been a Sunfish production.